Wow, got awful quiet. Hey, I see some funny new faces out there in the crowd.
So funny.
Oh, there you are.
I'm sorry, some new faces. That wasn't very nice, was it?
One new face. And Melissa.
Hey, Melissa.
Morning.
Good to have everybody. All right, we are in Matthew 28, the last book. After 13 years, we're finally getting to the last chapter. Matthew 28. So before we start, I have a request. Most of you know that we are going to be starting in Proverbs after Matthew. It looks like that may be 2 or 3 weeks away, i.e. not next week, but maybe the one after that, or maybe the one after that. I'm not sure if what I might do something. Anyway, it may take us 2 or 3 weeks to finish this up. My request for you is actually to read the book of Proverbs. Take some time and read it. It'll take you a couple hours, but it's not a bad read. And I just think you need the whole context of Proverbs in order to kind of see how it flows. So I will tell you, I'm still wrestling with Proverbs to try to figure out exactly how to present it. So I'd appreciate your prayers as over the next couple of weeks as I kind of work that out, because it's, as I've said before, it's an interesting book, and it doesn't flow well to an easy outline. Everybody has their own outline of Proverbs, and they're all different. So I'd appreciate your prayers there.
So last night, as I was going somewhere, Caleb was on, and they mentioned that the Caleb online app is doing a Proverbs devotion thing for the next month or something. I didn't quite catch it all, but it's supposed to go on, and they have a lot of the Caleb artists that will be addressed. They're taking verses and talking about them, and I just thought about it and just thought I'd mention that to you.
No,
that
good.
Other source for you and for all of us even. But
There's a lot of commentaries, and there's a lot of sermons on Proverbs. The problem is there's not many that actually go through the whole book, right? They pick out a section, or they do a kind of broad overview and pick out 3 or 4 verses. So that's the tricky part with trying to find something that's in detail like I'd like to dive. Anyway, let's get started. Thanks, CT. That's another good reference. So Matthew 28. So we are finally at the resurrection, the most important event that has ever happened in human history. And so we want to spend some time looking at that and seeing, what happened and what's the real message here. So let's get started. Chapter 28, verse 1. Mine says, "Now after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb." So now after the Sabbath, some of your translations may say at the end of the Sabbath, which is probably better. It's after the Sabbath, or at the end of the Sabbath, or after the end of the Sabbath may even be better. The point is the Sabbath ends, right, Saturday night at 6 p.m. And so this is Sunday morning, early in the morning. Mark says very early on the first day. Luke says at early dawn. John says while it was still dark. So it's most people speculate it's like 5 o'clock or so in the morning when this story begins. First day of the week, before dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. So, this is the day after the Sabbath. Again, this is Sunday. So this is the 3rd day. If you remember, we went to great lengths to talk about him being buried on Friday, such that he was in the ground on 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, again, to show Jesus' prophecy about his own death. When he said, many times, after 3 days I'll rise, right back in Matthew 12, Matthew 16, Matthew 17, Matthew 20, he said, I will rise again on the third day. And so this is that prophecy being fulfilled that we see here. Now, there's some other pieces to the story that, again, as usually as we're looking at this end of Matthew, we're having to go back and forth to the other Gospels to pick up little pieces here. So I want you to turn to Luke chapter 23. First of all, you'll notice in Matthew, it says that Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. So you know who Mary Magdalene is. The other Mary, again, is the mother of James the Less and Joseph. So those are the two Marys that they talk about there. If you go to chapter 23 of Luke, down at verse 55, 23:55, it says, and the women who had come with him from Galilee followed after, and they observed the tomb and how his body was laid, right? So this is when they put him in the tomb. We mentioned that the ladies were all there. And then in verse 56, it says, and then they returned and prepared spices and fragrant oils, and they rested on the Sabbath according to the commandments. So it looks like the ladies went back after they buried him. It was still before the Sabbath, right? It was sometime between 3 and 6 p.m. And they probably had to go maybe and purchase some spices and oils. They got those prepared for them to return after the Sabbath was over, because they're not allowed to get near a dead body on the Sabbath. Now, verse 24, now let's look at Luke's version there, chapter 24 rather in Luke. It says, now on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they and certain other women with them came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared. Okay, so again, although we only mention a few women, it looks like there were many women that were there. We have Mary Magdalene, we have Mary. If you skip down to chapter 24, verse 10, you'll see it says it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them who told these things to the apostles. So, there's more than just Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James. There was at least Joanna. Joanna, by the way, was the wife of a servant to Herod, interestingly, who was also a believer and follower of Christ. And all these ladies had followed him since Galilee. So we have another one. If you skip now to Mark, go to the book of Mark for a minute, chapter 16. Mark chapter 16, verse 1. We read the same event there. Mark chapter 16, verse 1. It says, now when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices that they might come and anoint him very early in the morning on the first day of the week. They came to the tomb when the sun has risen. Okay, so that now you see Salome is also added to the list of people whose names are missed out. Names are actually listed out, right? So why are the women coming to the tomb? This is an easy question.
Treat the body.
Yeah, they're there to anoint the body. Some of the commentaries say they're there to embalm the body, but we saw last week or the week before that when who was it? Joseph of Arimathea, right? And Nicodemus came. They brought 100 pounds of spices with them to put on the body, but they probably ran out of time. Remember, we were all rushing all of the events at the end to try to get him in the tomb before 6 o'clock, before the Sabbath. So the ladies are coming back to finish the job and do it right, frankly, probably. So they are bringing more spices to complete the wrapping up of the body and the entombment, if you will. So they're there, just out of love and compassion. It's kind of the last thing that they could do for Jesus, right? And so their love is kind of being expressed. But don't miss out on the courageousness of these women, right? They're going back there. They know being associated with Jesus is not a good thing at this time. And they're pretty courageous to go out there and be with the body. By the way, there's no disciples going with them, right? There's no courageous disciples. Oh, we'll go with you, ladies, and we'll help you do this. They are slinking away somewhere. When the ladies came, did they come to see the resurrection?
No.
No, right? They have no clue. They have no clue. They're shocked when it all happens. So just to be clear on what was going on there. All right, let's go on to verse 2. I'm back in Matthew 28, wherever I am. Yes, Matthew 28, verse 2. It says, "Behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it." I just love that "and sat on it" part of that verse. Hey, it just, I don't know, it just shows that he can do whatever he wants. He just sits on the stone, hangs out, kind of waits for people to show up. So I actually want to, if you didn't see it when you were in Mark, let me just read it to you. After what you can look if you want, but Mark 16, verse 3 says, "And the ladies said among themselves, who will roll away the stone from the door of the tomb?" Right? So they're going to the tomb. They don't know, by the way, that the guards are there. They're not aware that has happened, but they know that there's a stone rolled across it, and they're wondering who's going to remove that stone. So there's this great earthquake. Now I need you to go to John chapter 20, because there's another story that Matthew misses in these couple of moments here at the beginning. So go to John chapter 20, verse 1. John chapter 20, verse 1. Excuse me. Mine says, "Now, the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb." All right, so what we have here are two kind of different versions. Obviously, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all talk about the women who go. John focuses in on Mary Magdalene. Now, he doesn't say that the other women weren't there, but he focuses in on Mary Magdalene actually getting to the tomb. So what's interesting here in this story is that Mary Magdalene gets to the tomb. She sees the stone has been taken away from the tomb. Then verse 2, "And then she ran and came to Simon Peter and the other disciple." So Mary Magdalene gets to the tomb. So you got to think of Mary Magdalene as the Peter of the women, okay? Impulsive, doing the first thing, etc. Right? So Mary Magdalene gets to the tomb, sees the tomb stone rolled away, and turns around and runs back to tell the disciples. Right? The other women are still there. They're still there at the tomb. Okay. Now let's go back to Matthew chapter 28. And let's pick up the story. So an earthquake happens. Why does an earthquake happen?
God made it happen.
Wanted it to.
Thank you, CT. Why did the earthquake happen? I can wait.
Well, verse 2, mine says, because an angel came down from heaven and approached the stone and rolled it away.
Yeah. Thank you, Russell. It's right there in front of us. And so this is an important thing to focus in and make sure you get clear in your head. The earthquake happened because an angel came down and touched the earth. The angel comes down, descends into heaven. This is, you notice at the beginning of the verse, there's that special word we've talked about many times in Matthew, and that is behold, right? He's saying, watch out, guys. This is something important I'm about to tell you. An angel comes down, he touches the earth, and an earthquake happens. I mean, again, we've talked about this before. Earthquakes are often a sign of God's presence, a sign of God doing something. And right here, we see the angel coming down, touching the earth, and an earthquake happens. The earthquake is not a symbol of Jesus' resurrection. It's a symbol of the angel coming down and touching the earth. Now, it does say that the angel rolls the stone away. Why does the angel roll the stone away?
People could get in.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
The people could get in and see Jesus is gone.
Yeah. It's important to realize that the angel rolled the stone away so that people could get into the tomb, not so that Jesus could get out of the tomb. Right? It's not like Jesus was resurrected and then he waited standing at the door of the tomb for the angel to come so that he could open the door so that he could get out, right? I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Jesus was resurrected. Then the angel comes and he opens the door so that the women could actually get into the tomb. How did Jesus get out of the tomb? I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
You walked out.
How? The door is closed.
He walked right through it. Probably.
You
Who
walked through
knows?
the other doors too.
Yeah, right. We know when he gets to the upper room, right? He all of a sudden appears in the midst of them, somehow either going through the walls or just appearing, right? He's now in his resurrected body. Walls don't mean much. Rocks don't mean much, right? And so he can go wherever he wants at any time instantaneously. So I just want you to not get constrained in your thinking about, well, he's in this tomb and somehow the rock's going to get rolled away, then he can get out and then blah, 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 blah. No, he's in his resurrected body. He can go in and out wherever he wants. The stone is moved to let the women in, just as you said. All right, let's keep going. We're going to come back to that point in a minute, but verse 3, let's see the rest of this. It says, his countenance was like lightning, and his clothing was like white as snow. Talking here about the angel, right? He's like lightning, like, brilliant, blazing, shining, white, obviously indicating purity. It's a very similar description of Jesus at the Transfiguration, right? And another one is Daniel's vision of the Ancient of Days, very similar to this, right? Countenance bright like lightning, clothes like white of snow. So this is obviously a heavenly being, or at least someone in a resurrected body, this angel who has come. And then verse 4, and the guards shook for fear of him and became like dead men. So this angel appears, an earthquake occurs, he rolls back the stone, and the guards there are completely freaked out, right? And they essentially pass out from terror of what they're seeing. What's interesting is, when the women come here in a few minutes, the angel ministers to them, right? Says, "Fear not," etc. Right? But for these unbelieving guards, they're just their brains can't handle it. There's no comfort from the angels for them, and they passed out essentially from fear and terror of what they're seeing. So the angel ministers to the women, to those who are believers. He does not minister to those who are not. Now, we go to verse 5, and you have here the angel talking to the women. Before we do that, again, I need you to see another passage, which is in Mark chapter 16. So turn there to see the rest of the story. Mark chapter 16. Mark chapter 16, you remember, and I read verse 3 to you a minute ago. It says, and they said among themselves, who will roll away the stone of the door for us, door of the tomb for us? And now in verse 4, it says, but when they looked up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, for it was very large. So this is the point where we went to Matthew chapter 20, right? They see the stones rolled away. Mary Magdalene turns on her heel. She runs back to to tell the disciples. But verse 5, the rest of the women, and entering the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in a long white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Okay, now wait a minute. Where is, and this is obviously an angel, right? Where is the angel? I thought we said back in Matthew that he was sitting on the stone, and here we see the angel is in the tomb. Anybody clarify that for us?
moved.
Yeah, yes, he moved, right? So this is not a problem. If you remember back in Matthew when we read there, he's sitting on top of the tomb, and it's that time that the guards, right, they all pass out because they're seeing him, etc. But the ladies are not yet there when that occurs, right? They're not there. They're still coming up the path, if you will. By the time they get there, the angel is inside the tomb. That's all there is to it. There's no mystery and there's no disagreement in scripture there. It's just simply that the angel is now inside the tomb. All right. Verse 5, they entered the tomb. They saw a young man clothed in a long white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Good. Now let's go back to Matthew again. Just want to make sure you can turn pages.
So Rich?
Yeah.
So were you referring that there are people who maybe they argue that that's part of the problems with the Bible? They say that this guy says this thing and it says something else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are people that pick on this kind of a detail and say, oh my goodness, you can see the Bible is not credible because you got two different things. One says he's outside, one says he's inside, and that's just silliness. But yeah, exactly.
So I guess
All right.
I guess they just walked by the soldiers that had passed out.
There's no mention of that, is there? Yeah. All right, verse 5 now in Matthew 28. But the angel answered and said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. So, this phrase, the angel answered, they didn't ask a question, right? But the angel is answering them because he knows what's going on in their brains, right? You notice that he says, I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. How does he know that? Because they're angels, dagnabbit. Because they know. They have insight into people. So don't miss that little piece, right? Angels have insight into us, into our thinking, into what's going on in our heads. And these angels did. They knew why they were there. They knew. And as a result of that, they answered them and made this statement, right? The angel answered and said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. So that's a great comforting statement, right? First of all, do not be afraid, obviously. And that I know that you're here to see Jesus. They know, he knows what they're there for. And so that's got to be a great comfort to them as they see this angel. And again, the angel's ministering to them, trying to comfort them, trying to help them not to be afraid, whereas he didn't do that to the guards. You notice that the angel is not saying, oh, ye women of little faith, how could you not know that Jesus was going to arise, right? There's none of that. There's just comfort and compassion for these women as they come to the tomb at this point. All right, let's go on to verse 6. It says, he is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come see the place where the Lord lay. He is not here. Fortunately, the angels didn't just stop there and say, he's not here. That wouldn't have been very comforting. But he says, he's not here. He has risen, as he said, right? As he said. He's raised. He's raised by the power of the Father. He's raised. Jesus, remember Jesus said back in John, either one or two times ago, where Jesus said, I have the power to lay down my life. I have the power to pick it back up again, right? He has been raised here. And then he says, come and see, right? It's as he said, as he had said again. Matthew 12, Matthew 16, Matthew 17, Matthew 20, and various other places in the other Gospels, right? I will rise again. They never did understand that. But now they're confronted by this angel, with this message. I do want you to turn again to Luke chapter 24. excuse me, Luke chapter 24. Got lost my place. There we go. Verse 2. Luke 24, or we can start at verse 1, but let's start at verse 1. Luke 24. It says, now the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they and certain other women with them came to the tomb, bring the spices which they had prepared. Notice they had prepared the spices before they came. Verse 2. But they found the stone rolled away from the tomb, and they went in and did not find the body of Jesus. And it happened, as they were greatly perplexed about this, that behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. Then, as they were afraid, now let me just deal with that for the same reason CT brought it before. Here it says there's two men. The other version, we said there's one man. The other one said that there was one man who spoke to them. It didn't say there wasn't two men. It just said they focused in on the one man that spoke to them. Here we have two men that two men stood by them in shining garments. And then as they were afraid and bowed their faces to the earth, they said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here, but he is risen. Remember how he spoke to you when he was still in Galilee, and saying, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. So here the angels are actually quoting Jesus from back in Matthew 16 or 17. And then verse 8, and they remembered his words. That to me is the most significant phrase there. They remembered. They finally get it. This is the first time anybody of the disciples or the women understand that Jesus is going to rise again. So finally, they remembered his words. They remembered that he said this, and they make the connection between what's going on in front of them and what's going on in the prophecy that Jesus had made earlier. All right, now let's go back to Matthew 28. Are we having fun going back and forth?
Mm-hmm.
Matthew 28. All right, we're down to verse 7. Verse 7 says, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and indeed he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. Behold, I have told you. So the angel here is telling them, go quickly, return to the disciples and say he is risen from the dead. Now, one of the commentaries, or I guess it was one of the sermons I read, was talking about this, saying, Jesus could have said, okay, ladies, you're here, you're here and you're paying attention. The disciples, they're not here. They're not even worried about the body. So we're just going to ignore the disciples and go on, right? We're just going to forget them. They've messed up. They're so pitiful. They don't even come to the tomb. But even that Jesus would send them to the disciples just shows the grace of God. Another time when the disciples have messed up and not done what Jesus has expected of them, he still said, no, I want you to go and tell them. He could have said, hey, let's wait a week and then we'll tell them, right? Just to get them back somehow. He doesn't. Go and tell them that Jesus is risen and that indeed he's going before them to Galilee. Now, to Galilee is interesting, right? To Galilee, he's going to meet them in Galilee. He's going to meet them in, which is essentially a primarily Gentile area, right? He doesn't meet them in Jerusalem. He doesn't meet them near Jerusalem in Bethany or something. He's going to meet them all the way in Galilee, back where we started the ministry, which is essentially a multicultural area, if you will, right? It's an area really representative of the world that Jesus returns to. And he has this great appearance before them in Galilee for the commissioning, which we'll talk about next time. All right, verse 8. So they went out quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to bring his disciples word. So they leave exactly as they're instructed by the angel, but they leave with fear and joy. So why fear and joy? What's the two things together?
I mean, they just witnessed an earthquake, a miracle. I mean, the soldiers fainted from fear. So, I mean, obviously it was out of the norm. And then great joy because Jesus did what he said he was going to do. He rose from the dead.
Yeah. I just want you to notice, right? I mean, all the emotions of the women are there, right? I mean, it's just a very real passage. They could have just said, well, they were in such joy and they went back home. No, there's still a little fear there. There's still a little, leftover fear from, these are still, an angel or a couple of angels that are talking to us, and really not quite sure about all this. So they're obviously overcome with joy. It says great joy, but there's still fear there of what they have just witnessed, and not sure what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes. I mean, after what they have seen. So yeah, fear and joy, and now they run back to the disciples. In verse 9 now, and as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, "Rejoice." So that they came and held him by the feet and worshiped him. So mine says that Jesus said, "Rejoice." What does yours say?
Greeting.
Greeted.
Greetings.
Do not be afraid.
He said, "Do not be." Oh, in verse 10. Yeah, I'm talking about in verse 9.
Greetings.
Greetings. Yeah. So greetings is probably a better word than rejoice. He just essentially says hello. It was just a very common marketplace kind of greeting. It wasn't anything special. Mine says rejoice, which is, I think, a little over the top in what he really said to them. But essentially, it was just hello, and and they came to him, held him by the feet, and worshipped him. Right, that is their response. That is their response to him as they see him. Now, again, there's a little bit of a passage left out of here, and we've got to go see it. So I need you to turn again to John chapter 20. And by the way, I'm realizing we're going to finish early because we are near the end of our story here for today. But anyway, let's go to John chapter 20. I want to pick up the story of Mary Magdalene. Remember, we said Mary Magdalene. Now, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb with the ladies. She sees the stone rolled away. She makes a U-turn and goes back to tell Peter and John. The rest of the ladies go into the tomb and they get to see the angels, right? So let's pick it up at verse 2. It says, "Then she ran and came to Simon Peter and to the other disciples whom Jesus loved, and said to them, they have taken away the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Right? So she doesn't know anything that the angel has said. All that she knows is, the tomb is open. They've taken away the body. And now verse 3, that Peter therefore went out, and the other disciple were going to the tomb. So they both ran together. The other disciple outran. Who's the other disciple, by the way?
John.
It's John, right? So they both ran together. The other disciple outran Peter and came to the tomb first. So they're running. John outruns Peter. He gets to the tomb first. And he, John, stooping down, looking in, saw the linen clothes lying there, and yet he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, went into the tomb, right? He just zoomed right past John. He saw the linen clothes lying there, and the handkerchief that had been around his head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded together in a place by itself. And of course, that's significant, right? That the cloths are laying there, that the cloth that was over his head is folded in a place, right? So there wasn't those who say that his body was stolen or taken away by force, right? There would not be this nice orderly set of linens and the cloth over his face. And then verse 8, then the other disciple who came to the tomb first went in also. Of course, this is John, and he saw and believed. Right? He saw and believed. He saw and he understood. Right? So this is when Peter and John finally get it. The ladies who went in earlier, they got it, and now you have John and Peter getting it. Look at verse 9. For as yet they did not know the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. Right? So this is when they finally understand that Jesus has to rise from the dead, even though Jesus has told them over and over and over. And in verse 10, then the disciples went away to their own home. So That's the interaction with Peter and John. Now go on to verse 11, though. It says, but Mary stood outside the tomb weeping. As she wept, she stooped down and looked into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting, one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus lay. Now this is kind of amazing, right? Peter and John are in there. They don't see anything except the linen cloths, the folded linen cloths. They don't see any angels. They take off and go home. Mary stays there, hangs out at the tomb, sobbing. And when she looks into the tomb, she sees these two angels. So she sees the two angels. Verse 13, then they said to her, woman, why are you weeping? And she said to them, because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. Now when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, and did not know that it was Jesus. And Jesus said to her, woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? And she, supposing it to be the gardener, said to him, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. And Jesus said to her, Mary. And she turned and said to him, Rabboni, which is to say teacher. By the way, the word Rabboni is a high-level word for rabbi. So it's like, it's more like master than teacher, as the scripture says here. So anyway, she says master, Rabboni. Verse 17, Jesus said to her, do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. And Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord, and that he had spoken these things to her. So, what's amazing to me is that the ladies get to the group of ladies go into the tomb. They see the two angels there. The angel speaks to them, gives them instructions as to what they are to do. Mary, because she zoomed around and went back to get Peter and John, she doesn't get to see the angels. But after Peter and John leave here, not only do the angels show up, Jesus shows up, just as Jesus showed up to the women earlier. He shows up to Mary Magdalene to kind of complete the appearances to all of the women. So why were the women the first ones to see him? Why did the women get to see the angels? Why did the women get to see Jesus first before the disciples?
They stepped up first.
Yeah, they weren't
What do you
afraid.
mean? What do you mean they stepped up first?
They went. I mean, they were there first. They went looking for him first.
They weren't afraid. They weren't hiding like the disciples.
In those days, were the women the only ones that
Involved.
prepared the bodies,
Yeah.
the body?
Give me your question again, Curtis.
In those days, were the women the only ones that prepared the body? Or the only
Yeah,
ones that-
typically the women were the ones that prepared the body. As we said last time, Joseph, Arimathea, Nicodemus were there bringing the spices, helping carry the body into the tomb. They may have helped with preparing the body, but more likely, the group of women who watched the whole burial were actually part of the burial and helped, the first time they did it. And now they're kind of coming back to complete the job.
Rich, it could be that the women just had more compassion. They really cared about what happened to Jesus, whereas the disciples they cared only what happened to them. They were hiding.
Yeah.
They were fearful what
Yeah.
we're going to happen to them. So
Yeah, I think all those things that you said are right. And the way I would say it was, they got to see Jesus and they got to see the disciples because they were there. Because they showed up, because they were courageous, as you said, right? But they were there. They showed up. They were because of their compassion and love for him. They were there, such that they could be ministered to, such that they could see the angels, etc. Whereas disciples weren't there, right? If the disciples were there, they probably would have seen it too, but they weren't there. So what's the message for us? You got to be there. You got to be there where Jesus needs you to be in order to be ministered by him. You got to be there where he expects you to be. I just remember from the Hamilton play, right? Where he says, I want to be in the room where it happens, right? I think the women were there in the room where it happened. And it certainly makes me think about things like 21 Days of Prayer, where God expects us to be there where it happens, where things are going to happen. Things are going to happen at 21 Days of Prayer, and we can see them because we're a part of it, because we're participating, because we're in the room where it can happen. Whether that's online or not, doesn't matter. My point is that we are so unexpectant. We're so not looking for him. The ladies were looking. The ladies were there. Disciples were not. I think often we're not. We're not paying attention. We're not looking for what Jesus is about to do. What does he want to do with us? We're paying attention to other things. Disciples were hiding. They're sneaking off in a corner. But the women were ministering, and the women were there. And so they get to see something amazing. And that is the angels speaking to them and then actually meeting Jesus before anybody else does. So actually, I'm done really early. How does that happen? Y'all listened way too quickly this morning. So we will spend, next time we'll spend a little bit more time talking about the disciples and their interaction with Jesus, and also the soldiers and what happens to them, right? Because they get bribed, and then we have the Great Commissioning, but there's several other events that happen where Jesus shows himself and people see him. And so we want to talk about all those events before he returns to heaven. I guess let me ask this while we're here. We got a few minutes. What's the big deal about the resurrection? Why is that a big deal? Okay, maybe it's not a big deal.
Somebody rises from the dead.
Why is that a big deal?
The basis of our Christian faith.
Yeah.
In what way?
Resurrection, nothing else matters.
Why do you say that? I mean, he's died for our sins. What does it matter that he resurrected?
So,
But one day he's gonna come back and we're gonna rise and go up to where he is.
and I think the ascension, like when you think of it, we say death and resurrection, but also the ascension, all of it is what makes Christianity different from the other religions where they're dead. They might say they died for you or they did this or that for you, but so what if there's no resurrection for you because of the work Christ did.
It makes Christ different from everybody else. I mean, there's nobody else that has done this.
I think, following along the line that you said there, I mean, it's the proof, right? It's the proof that all that Jesus has said, that he's, dying for our sins, is the proof that that's real and that's true, right? It's the ultimate proof. Without that, it's just, okay, he's died for our sins, but how do I know? How do I know that that's true, right? I know because he rose from the dead. It shows that he has the power of God, that he is God. Yeah, it's the ultimate proof. All right. Speak amongst yourselves. No, let's go ahead and move into prayer time a little early, and then you can actually have some time to just enjoy each other. That'll be okay. All right, Joe, what do we have for prayers?
Recording.
Stop the recording. That's what we have for prayers.